Hello and welcome to Learning Music with Pat. Today I'm going to start a 2-segment episode on fingering charts. What are they? How do you know how to finger the instrument? Why are they important? And what I want to do is show you the basic fingerings for the recorder, because that's what we're dealing with here is the recorder. Now, there are different ways of showing fingering charts. Some of them are complicated, some of them are simple. I like the ones that detail the instruments, that you actually sketch out the instrument and then you see the finger holes on the instrument itself. There are several that do that. There are some that do not. So I'm just going to give you an example here. What do you usually have when you have a fingering chart? Well, here's an example. I just put this together yesterday. Usually you have a series of holes. These holes are the tone holes. The one over here would be the thumb hole in the back. You can't show it from the front, but it's important in octaves. And also, when you get down here, there are some instruments that have 2 little holes instead of 1, but they're really 1 larger hole divided into 2 holes. So you have your left hand up here, 1, 2, 3, and then you have your right hand on the bottom, 1, 2, 3, and sometimes that little extra hole there, sometimes not. But at any rate, this is what it usually looks like. And what they do is they fill in the holes that have to be covered. For example, when you get something like this is a closed tone hole. That means you put your finger on it and you press it down so that the hole is not showing, so you cover it up. This would be the open hole where it's not covered at all. It's important that it stay open for the note that you want. And this is the half hole. What I generally do when I'm going to half hole something is I'm going to just withdraw the finger a little and let a little bit of that hole show. The rest of the hole is covered. Now that's very important when you're doing sharps and when you're doing flats, and it's also important in octaves. So this is it. So if I'm going to show you this, and I will show you this, if we look, let me get this. If we look at the staff, here's the staff, and here we have a G, an A, and a B. So how do you finger those? Well, your left hand goes on top, so this would be your first 3 fingers, and you can see that they're closed. You can also see that the hole in the back, which is the thumb hole, is also closed. This would be the thumb hole in the back. You can't see it from the front, and that's covered. And then for that G, these first 3 holes are covered. All of those are covered. Now, for an A, which is just the next note up, you cover only 2 of the tone holes in the front, and the tone hole in the back, the thumb hole, is covered. So this is how you would play an A. And then for a B, which is 1 less, there's only 1 tone hole covered plus a thumb hole, and these 2 fingers are open. These 2 holes are open. This would be the B. So anytime you have a note that's closed, that you have to close to do it, then that's going to be colored in. Anytime that you have a note that's open, you do not cover those at all. Those stay open. And if you want the half hole, and I'm going to try to show this to you from the back, it's kind of hard to do, but here my thumb is covering that thumb hole in the back, which is really a tone hole. And you withdraw that a little bit so that that is showing. Not a lot. It's not showing a lot. In fact, it may not even be halfway. But that's important in playing some octaves. If I want to play a low E, and I want that E to go up an octave, all I did was I take the fingering and I remove that thumb a little bit, pull it down, and that's called half-holing. Now, half-holing is also important when you're doing sharps and flats. You see, I pull that finger down. If you look at this finger here, I pulled it off so that not all the way, just a little bit, so that it's partly covered and it's partly not covered. For this G, I took this fourth finger and I just removed it a little tiny bit, and a little of that shows, and you can get a G sharp that way. You could also get it other ways. So which is the best way to do it? I think it depends upon what you're playing. Now I know with the saxophone, I've said it before, there are 5 ways of playing a B flat. So how do you know which one to use? It depends upon the notes that go before it and the notes that go after it, which is the most convenient. But you can choose any one. Now there are 2 or 3 fingers of the B flat that are rarely used, but there are other fingerings of the B flat on the saxophone. Well, here I've got a G and I want a G sharp. For a G sharp, I can put this finger up and put these 2 down. Or, depending upon what I feel like doing, I can pull that G, that fourth finger off where the G would be, and leave that hole partly uncovered. You can see in the monitor that it's partly uncovered. Actually, the more accurate way would be this way. But you know, I'm kind of flexible. I use what works and what works the best. So what you need to do for fingering charts is know when you see a note, how many fingers do you put down? How many holes do you cover? Do you cover the thumb hole or do you leave it open? There are some notes when you can't cover the thumb hole, because if you do, you won't get the note. And the D is probably the most common. Now when I play this is a C, and if I want to play a D, all I have to do is remove the tone hole, remove the thumb completely. And then I get the D. The thumb hole is not on. Neither are any of these covered, but I have to keep my hand down here, partly to balance the instrument, and partly that if I needed to make a quick change because I'm going to play a lower note, I'm not fiddling around trying to find the holes. My hands are right there. It's important when you hold an instrument that you hold the fingers so that they're lightly curved over the fingerboard. Now on a keyboard, all of this would be a keyboard, but on an instrument it's called a fingerboard, where you put your hands down. Never do this, because if you do, you're not going to be able to get your notes in time. Just slightly curved, and then you have full flexibility of your fingers to cover those holes that you want, and full flexibility not to cover them if you don't want to, because my hand is in that position, but I don't have any of these fingers covered at all. But I could, if I wanted to go from a G to a D, I could do that quickly. If my hand was like this, I wouldn't be able to do it quickly enough. So at any rate, the fingering charts that you see mainly is going to be a series of holes, some of them covered, some of them not, depending upon what note that you're playing. Remember, left hand always goes on top, right hand always goes on the bottom, and usually your thumb hole, which you can't see, is sticking out to the side somewhere. And so you close a hole if it's blackened in, you keep it open if it's not blacked in, like all of these here, because I was playing G, A, and B. These fingerings are not used at all. So you keep them open, and if you want a half hole, you just go ahead and just use that symbol for a half holing, and then you draw your finger away. And so that's the way that most of the fingering charts are. I'm going to show you a few, and then I'm going to get into most detail. This is a fingering chart that I made up myself, and you see it has all of those holes, some covered and some not covered for the various notes that you're going to play. I also have a small staff, and the note is on the staff. Well, you're not going to be able to see it clearly here, because but if you're using it, of course you wouldn't be looking at it from a distance. But here's the note on the staff, here's the thumb hole covered, and that is your C. But I've sketched out the instrument so you can see all of the tone holes, and so you can judge. Here's 3 here for a G, Here's 4 here for an F, and then for an E you've got 5, and then so it goes down. This is the D. This would be the low C. All of them covered. Now, what's handy about fingering charts like that is that you can figure out easily what fingers are closed and what fingers are open, and so that's important to do. Be able to do that. Now, here's another example. Here's an example where the whole recorder is shown, and it shows very clearly left hand goes on top, and this is the first, second, and third finger. So first would be the index finger, second would be the second finger down, and third would be like 1, 2, 3, and you'd be able to see that. And then 4 starts here. That's going to be the right hand, and that's going to be 4, 5, 6, and 7. This looks like a little bit smudged here. It actually isn't smudged. It actually shows 2 little tiny tone holes in one. And some of the more modern instruments, in fact quite a few, have 2 sets of little tiny holes on this one and 2 tiny sets of holes on this one, and it's handy for playing sharps and flats. That's why they're there. But you can still play those sharps and flats even if they weren't there. And here you have, this is an entire fingering chart where it goes not only into the main fingerings, but it also shows the sharps and the flats, and it fingers them all for you, all the way from the lowest note in the recorder, which is that middle or low C, to the higher C, which is over here. And it even shows the half holings. Now, I'm not going to point out too much with this because it's going to be too hard for you to see it, but you get the gist of the idea of what it is. Now, here's another example. I do like this example. It shows so clearly the position of the hands. Left hand on top, right hand on the bottom. The entire instrument is sketched out. It's a nice little sketch. It's quite accurate. And all of the tone holes are showing. This is a C, and this is a thumb hole in the back. This little one here that keeps appearing are the tone holes in the back. And these are, for the most part, not covered because you're dealing with C, B, A, and the more notes you play, the more fingers go down to cover it. So that is actually a pretty good diagram. And this is the kind of thing I like to see, is when you can actually sketch out the instrument, see the instrument, and of course, when you're looking at a fingering chart and you see those little holes, you know what they are, but it makes it so much better if you can see something. And here we've got the hand positions. The hand positions are exactly right. The instrument and the way it appears is exactly right. There's a staff. The note is on the staff, and these darkened areas show you how that you play those notes, and it goes all the way through the scale. The flats and sharps aren't in this one, but all the major scale from the highest to the lowest, and you get your major notes that way. When you get to sharps and flats, you're going to either be adding fingers or half-holing. In some cases, you're going to be breathing harder, and that automatically bounces a note up. But this is a good fingering chart for you to see. Now, I'm going to go through every single note when I get to it here, but I still want to show you some more fingering charts, if I can get the pages to turn for me the way that I want them to. Okay, this is my rendition of a saxophone. I drew this up particularly to show where the position of the fingers are. This would be the B, this would be the A, this would be the G, and on the right hand, on the bottom, this would be the F, and this would be the E, the D, and way down here is the C. Now, of course, there are keys. I'm just showing you where the holes are, but there are keys that you press to get those holes down. and you get a lot of side keys, but this shows you the position, B-A-G, F-E-D, and then the low C is down here. Now that's exactly the way that the recorder plays a C scale. You have your C as just this one, the second one down, and then the B is just the first one down. Then when you add the two together, you would get an A and a G. Let me show you that on this recorder here. To play the C, I am only going to play the second hole down plus the thumb hole. That's going to be the C. Now the B, even though it's a note below it, is just the top one and the thumb hole. So you play that B, you might think that it shouldn't be up that high because after all, it's a lower note than the C, but that's the way it works. C is that second finger down, the middle finger, and the B is just the index finger, that's finger number 1, and of course the thumb hole is covered in both. And then you add them all the way down. You add the second one down and you get the A. You add the third one down, then you get the G. And then another one down, you get the F. And then E and D. And then the lowest note, which my finger is covering, is the C. C, B, A, G, F, E, D, and C. And you'll also notice on this recorder, the last two have of the finger holes. There are 2 finger holes here. Whoops, I gotta turn this right so you can see it. And the one above it, there are 2 little ones. 2 little ones on the D and 2 little ones on the C. Notice that the C is over to the side. And when I showed you that first chart that I showed you, there was a little hole toward the side. That would be the C. Okay, so B, A, G, F, E, D, and then C. And those little holes, 2 of them, you cover them all. You cover them both when you play the D, and you cover it both when you play the C. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then C if you're running up the scale. So that's how it's done. So I wanted to show this to you because there's so much similarity between the woodwind instruments, and that C major scale on the recorder is fingered exactly like the C major key on the alto saxophone, where this second one is the C, and then this becomes the B. Put them together, then you get the A, G, F, E, D, and down in the lower part here would be the C. And that's the way that the saxophone works for that C major scale. Now this is what I consider to be an extremely good fingering chart. This is the whole, except for the neck piece and the mouthpiece, this is the saxophone. And what I have done is I've colored in the keys that you press. The holes that go down, of course, are right underneath them. This is the B, this is the A, this is the G, and then you start over here, F, E, D, and C. Now, what causes those holes to go down? I mean, you can't finger them like you can a recorder. With a recorder, your fingers are close together. But there's all of these side keys. These are called side keys, and they're all over the instrument. And even the octave mechanism is on the neck piece, which it doesn't show here, but it is. And you press all of these side keys. These keys go down when you press the side keys for them. You actually are fingering B, A, G, F, E, D, C. But when you use the side keys and the keys that are available, it takes care of moving these keys shut to a shut position. If they're not, of course, they might stay open for some notes. But that's the way the saxophone works. It's very interesting to see that. And I like to bring that diagram in because it is a good diagram of the saxophone. Now let me see. Now here's also from the same book. I took this from one of my original saxophone books that I did when I was studying the saxophone. Here you have the instrument. Here you have the top part of the instrument, the bottom part of the instrument, and this is the way that a note would be played. Now here's the treble clef, and here is D. I'm going to show this one because it shows it more extensively. This is the D. It's a low D, and it's the note which is right below the staff. If you're using a fingering chart which shows holes, then all of these holes are going to be covered. And so they show that using the holes like I've shown you before, with 3 on top and 3 on the bottom. But this shows the whole keyboard. This shows the whole fingerboard, where the fingers are and how the fingers are located on the instrument and what finger is pressed down. You know, all of these are pressed down, and so it shows that well. This one here is a C, and it shows this finger pressed down. And that's the way it is played, of course. The C is right there. The C is right there. The finger that goes down is that second finger, as I've mentioned before when I showed the recorder or the saxophone. This goes down. These fingers stay up. But you have a really excellent diagram of the instrument itself so that you can see what it's like. And it's easier to read a kind of finger chart like that. So, and I have a couple of pages of these. So let me show you another one. Here we have B, A, G, F, E, and it shows you clearly here. This is the front part of the saxophone. This would be the bell right here, and you have this, and this key covered for the left hand, and all of those holes are covered. And on the right hand, you just have these 2 covered, and it shows that on the holes. These 2 are covered. This is left open. This is not covered. If you wanted to cover that third one, you would have a D, so you don't want to do that. So this is the B, A, G, F, E, and you see these fingers these keys all go down because of side keys and other keys that you're pressing, so they all go down. But with the size of the instrument, you have to have rods. All of these things here are rods, and they connect the keys to one another because your fingers would never be able to expand to the point where you could finger all of that. So you have keys that do the fingering for you and side keys which are going to close these holes up here. And this, of course, is the F. 1, 2, 3, and that one goes down for the F on the right-hand side. These 2 are left open. You can tell by the way the drawing is that this is the only finger down. These are the only fingers down here. This one's not touching anything. These 3 are not touching anything. So you have a really good representation of what the keys are, what they look like, how you can learn to finger them, and if you're using these different holes, this would be it. You probably can't see this well enough for me to point it out to you, but you would use the holes, and you can see that some of them are covered, others are not, and that's the way that it goes. That was my first saxophone book, and saxophone is my major instrument, and all of the keys were shown that way. Now, getting back to the recorder, here's a picture of the recorder, mouthpiece, left hand, right hand, and then it's all sketched out for you with the holes that have to be covered and the holes that have to be left open. So you see, usually it's not hard to read these diagrams, but some of them are more complicated than others. Now, we don't have a whole lot of time, so I'm just going to begin this here. This is one of the way that I have shown, or will show you when we get to it in the next segment, for a fingering chart for the recorder. This happens to me sopranino. There's a double hole here, and there's only one hole here. That's just the way it was made. As a matter of fact, it is this sopranino. I took it to a photocopy place and I photocopied it. This is my sopranino. It's in the key of F, but I'm going to be using it, showing different keys on the regular recorder. So this is it, the sopranino. You can see it clearly, and if I were to take it, and if I were to move it in a slanting position, which I do here, you can see the tone hole in the back, and you can see the regular tone holes in front, and there's a little double hole right here, which I showed you, and this one is not a double hole. It doesn't matter because you can still play the same amount. It's just the way that it's built. And this is a thumb hole. So what I'm going to do on the next segment, because we don't have time to do it this segment, is show you the scale for the main recorder, but I'm going to use this form because it's just so easy to follow of the sopranino, but we're going to pretend that it is a melody recorder, and I'm going to show you all of the fingers of the scale. I'm not going to use the sharps or flats. This is if I turned it to the side so you can see both the tone hole in the back with the thumb hole and the tone holes in the front. And this is what I used for as I drew this out. This is going to be like a recorder, 2 double holes here, but you can see where your fingers would be in these holes. This would be the thumb hole in the back, and this would be the holes in the front, and you can see it, and the whole instrument is sketched out this way. So that's the form I'm going to be using, and since I don't have much time left, I'm going to close it here, and I'm going to show you the scales for all of the major keys of the recorder using this form, sketching the whole form out, sketching the whole instrument out. So we'll close it here, and we'll continue with this next time. Please join me then.